Chapter 3, The Spouter Inn, Part 3. Whether that mattress was stuffed with corn cobs or broken crockery, there is no telling. But I rolled about a good deal and could not sleep for a long time. At last I slid off into a light doze and had pretty nearly made a good offing towards the land of Nod when I heard a heavy footfall in the passage and saw a glimmer of light coming to the room from under the door. Lord save me, thinks I. That must be the harpooner, the infernal head peddler. But I lay perfectly still and resolved not to say a word till spoken to. Holding a light in one hand and that identical New Zealand head in the other, the stranger entered the room. Without looking towards the bed, placed his candle a good way off from me on the floor in one corner, then began working away at the knotted cords of the large bag before I spoke of as being in the room. I was all eagerness to see his face, but he had kept it averted for some time while employed in unlacing the bag's mouth. This accomplished, however, he turned round when, good heavens, what a sight! Such a face! It was of a dark purplish yellow color, here and there stuck over with large blackish-looking squares. Yes, it's just as I thought. He's a terrible bedfellow. He's been in a fight, got dreadfully cut, and here he is, just from the surgeon. But at the moment he chanced to turn his face towards the light, that I could plainly see they could not be sticking, that I could plainly saw that they could not be sticking plasters at all, with these black squares on his cheeks. They were stains of some sort or the other. At first I knew not what to think of this, but soon an inkling of the truth occurred to me. I remember a story of a white man, a whaleman too, who, following one of the cannibals, had been tattooed by them. I concluded that this harpooner, in the course of his distant voyages, must have met with a similar adventure. And what is it, thought I, after all? It's only his outside. A man can be honest in any sort of skin. But then, what to make of his own earthly complexion, that part of it, lying round about that, and completely independent of the squares of tattooing? To be sure, it might be nothing but a good coat of tropical tanning, but I never heard of a hot sun tanning a white man into a purplish yellow one. However, I had never been in the South Seas, and perhaps the sun there produced these extraordinary effects upon the skin. Now, while all these ideas were passing through me like lightning, this harpooner never noticed me at all. But, after some difficulty having opened his bag, he commenced fumbling in it, and presently pulled out a sort of tomahawk, a sealskin wallet with the hair on. Placing these on his old chest in the middle of the room, he took the New Zealand head, a ghastly thing enough, and crammed it down into the bag. He now took off his hat, a new beaver hat, when I came nigh, singing out with fresh surprise. There was no hair on his head, none to speak of at least, nothing but a cheap scalp knot twisted up on his forehead. His bald purplish head now looked for all the world like a mildewed skull. Had not the stranger stood between me and the door, I would have bolted out of it quicker than ever I bolted a dinner. Even as it was, I thought something of slipping out the window, but it was the second floor back. I am no coward, but what to make of this head-peddling purple rascal altogether past my comprehension. Ignorance is the parent of fear, and being completely nonplussed and confounded about the stranger, I confess I was now as much afraid of him as it was the devil himself who had thus broken into my room in the dead of night. In fact, I was so afraid of him that I was not game enough just then to address him and demand a satisfactory answer concerning what seemed inexplicable in him. Meanwhile, he continued the business of undressing, and at last showed his chest and arms. As I live, these covered parts of him were checkered with the same squares as his face. His back, too, was over the same dark squares. He seemed to have been in a 30 years' war, and just escaped from it with a sticking plaster shirt. Still more, his very legs were marked, as if a parcel of dark green frogs were running up the trunks of his young palms. It was now quite plain that he must be some abominable savage or other shipped aboard of a whaleman in the South Seas, and so landed in this Christian country. I quake to think of it. A peddler of heads, too, perhaps the heads of his own brothers. He might take a fancy to mine, heavens. Look at that tomahawk. Look at that tomahawk. Hey, can you stop me now? I'm trying to record this. Look at that tomahawk. But there was no time for shuddering, for now the savage went about something that completely fascinated my attention and convinced me that he must indeed be a heathen. Going to his heavy grego or warpaw or dead knot, which he had previously hung on a chair, he fumbled in the pockets and produced at length a curious little deformed image with a hunch on its back and exactly the color of a 3 days old Congo baby. Remembering the embalmed head, at first I thought that this black mannequin was a real baby preserved in some similar manner, but seeing it was not at all limber, that it glistened a good deal like polished ebony, I concluded that it must be nothing but a wooden idol, for which indeed it proved to be. Now the savage goes up to the empty fireplace and, removing the papered fireboard, sets up this little hunchback image like a 10-pin between the andirons. The chimney jams and all the bricks inside were very sooty, so that I thought this fireplace made a very appropriate little shrine or chapel for his Congo idol. I now screwed my eyes hard towards the half-hidden image, feeling but ill at ease meantime, to see what was next to follow. First he takes about a double handful of shavings out of his grego pocket and places them carefully before the idol. Then, laying a bit of the ship biscuit on top and applying the flame from the lamp, he kindled the shavings into a sacrificial blaze. Presently, after many hasty snatches into the fire and still hastier withdrawals of his fingers, whereby he seemed to be scorching them badly, he at last succeeded in drawing out the biscuit. Then, blowing off the heat and ashes a little bit, he made a polite offer of it to the little Negro. But the little devil did not seem to fancy such dry sort of fare at all. He never moved his lips. All these strange antics were accompanied by still stranger guttural noises from the devotee, who seemed to be praying in a sing-song or else singing some pagan psalmody or other, during which his face twitched about in the most unnatural manner. At last, extinguishing the fire, he took the idol up very unceremoniously and bagged it up again in his grego pocket as carelessly as if he were a sportsman bagging a dead woodcock. All these queer proceedings increased my uncomfortableness, and seeing him now exhibiting strong symptoms of concluding his business operations and jumping into bed with me, I thought it was high time now or never, before the light was put out, to break the spell in which I had been so long been bound. But the interval I spent in debilitating what to say was a fatal one. Taking up his tomahawk from the table, he examined the head of it for an instant, then holding it to the light with his mouth at the handle, he puffed out great clouds of tobacco smoke. Oof. The next moment the light was extinguished, and this wild cannibal, tomahawk between his teeth, sprang into bed with me. I sang out. I could not help it now, and giving a sudden grunt of astonishment, he began feeling me. Stammering out something, I knew not what, I rolled away from him against the wall, and then conjured him, whoever or whatever he might be, to keep quiet and let me get up and light the lamp again. But his guttural responses satisfied me at once that he but ill comprehended my meaning. "Who the devil you?" he at last said. "You no speaky, damn me. I kill ye." And so saying, the lighted tomahawk began flourishing about me in the dark. "Landlord, for God's sakes! Peter Coffin!" shouted I. "Landlord, watch! Coffin! Angels, save me! Speak ye! Tell me who you be, or damn ye, I kill ye!" Again growled the cannibal, while his torrid flourishing of the tomahawk scattered the hot tobacco ashes about me till I thought my linen would get on fire. But thank heaven, at that moment the landlord came into the room, light in hand, and leaping from the bed, I ran up to him. "Don't be afraid now," said he, grinning again. "Queequeg here wouldn't harm a hair on your head." "Stop your grinning," shouted I. "Why didn't you tell me that the infernal harpooner was a cannibal?" "I thought you'd know it. Didn't I tell ye? He was peddling heads around town." "But turn flukes again and go to sleep, Queequeg. Look here, you sabe me, I sabe you. This man sleepy, you sabe." "Be sabe plenty," grunted Queequeg, puffing away at his pipe and sitting up on the bed. "You giddy in," he added, motioning to me with his tomahawk and throwing the clothes to one side. He really did this in not only a civil, but a really kind and charitable way. I stood looking at him a moment. For all his tattooings, he was on the whole a clean, comely-looking cannibal. What's all the fuss I've been making about, thought I to myself. The man's a human being just as much as I am. He has just as much reason to fear me as I do to be afraid of him. Better sleep with a sober cannibal than a drunken Christian. "Landlord," said I, "tell him to stash his tomahawk there, or pipe, or whatever you call it, Tell him to stop smoking, in short, and I will turn in with him. But I don't fancy having a man smoking in bed with me. It's dangerous, besides I ain't insured. This being told to Queequeg, he at once complied, and again politely motioned me to get into the bed, rolling over to one side as much as to say, I won't touch a leg of ye. Good night, landlord, said I. You may go. I turned in and never slept better in my life.